Hi folks. Somebody on one of the Facebook forums was asking how you could use Logic to run backing tracks live and also use Logic to trigger MIDI, using MIDI to control the GX-100. Now, I use this in the band that I'm in, Explosive Light Orchestra. We use this on every show, and it's made my life so much easier because I don't have to tap dance, I don't have to change pedals live, it's all programmed in advance. I'm going to show you how to do it. There's two parts to it. First part is how do you put the MIDI data that you're going to be using into Logic, so I'll show you how to do that in a Logic session I've got right here. And the second part is programming the GX-100 so that it will respond to those MIDI controls. There's some MIDI terminology that will be really helpful for us today. We're going to use two MIDI terms. We're going to talk about a program change and a control change. For our intents and purposes today, a program change is going to be changing patches. So your GX100 has got, let's say, 128 different patches. They're numbered 1-1, 1-2, 1-3, but they all have a MIDI number as well. And the MIDI numbers go from 0 to 127. So your patch 1-1 is MIDI 0. Your 1-2 is MIDI 1. And that's weird to get used to, but it's, once you get your head around it, really easy. And the other one is a control change. Again, hundreds of different values, 128 different values for control change. We're just going to use control changes to change any parameter that we like. What we're going to do is have Logic send a piece of information called a control change, and that's going to tell the GX100 turn something on or turn something off. And then you can program GX100 to then do whatever you need it to do. So you might use that control change to turn overdrive on, or you might use it to turn delay off. For the video today, we're going to be working with this song, When I Was a Boy. The reason I chose this one was that it uses two different patches. So I've got 8-1 and 8-2. Normally, if I was playing this live, I would use the buttons to change some parameters. So this is my verse tone, and I can flick on a rotary control using this. Just quickly show you the effects chain. If I push this, the rotary comes on and off, which I would do for the chorus. This is 8-2, this is 8-1. So in MIDI code, 8-1 would be program 32, and 8-2 would be program 33. Let's look a little more closely at what's happening in this patch, the solo patch, and this will illustrate our point. If we look in the effects chain, we've got a compressor, we've got an overdrive, an amp, noise gate, EQ, rotary, volume, and then delay and reverb. Now, when I want a little more push for the second part of the solo, I push the C1 button, and you can see the overdrive kicks in. You can also see the delay kicks in. But there's a third thing that actually happens as well. So if we look at the amp, it's a Brit stack, so the Marshall copy. The gain is on medium. If you go to the second window, you can see the EQ. You go to the third window, we've got the solo switch, which is normally off, but when I push C1, the solo switch comes on. So at the same time, three things happen on the patch. I have overdrive kicks in, solo switch kicks in, and delay all kicks in. Gives it a big meaty sound. Got a brand new Logic session right in front of me. I'm not going to need this for what I'm doing today, so move that out my way. Now, before we put any backing track, any data into this at all, we need to stop GX100 from being able to send MIDI data back to Logic. That can cause this like feedback loop almost. It will just change on its own. It's very off-putting. So we switch this off in File, Project Settings, MIDI, and that's just the settings for this one project we're working on. We go to the input filter. input filter stops, as far as I can tell, any MIDI signals coming into Logic. And I'm just going to select all of those just to stop any sort of headaches further down the line. What we're going to do now that we're ready, we're going to put our audio into this section here. I've got this in Finder. We're using this When I Was a Boy. That's our click track, my practice track, if you like, for this song. So let's just pop that into that track there. Now, the next thing to make sure is that our tempo is correct. I know that this is not 120 beats a minute. I know this is 76 beats a minute, so I'm just going to drop that down to 76. And you can see there it's lined up with the grid. Lovely. Now, this is the backing track. We need to put MIDI data running alongside from bar 1 all the way through to the end of our song, which is bar 65-ish. So we're going to put a new track in place, new external MIDI track. There that is. However, there's nowhere for that data to be recorded right at the moment. We need to give it a region. So we're going to use our pencil tool, create a region, go back to the pointer tool. We can then expand this out. That goes to the end. Fine, do it that way. Now, this is where our MIDI data is actually going to get recorded, or where it's actually going to get put in place. I'm going to put the MIDI data in using the event window, which I can bring up using the key D for Delta. That brings it up, that takes it away. Same button, D, brings that up. D, the event window, is where we can put in notes, program changes, controller changes. They're the things we're interested in. You can also add aftertouch, poly aftertouch, lots of other MIDI terms. Now I'm going to deselect all of those just so that I don't accidentally put something else in. I'm only interested in putting in program changes and controllers. Now, here's how I would do this. I use the playhead, place the playhead where I want to add something, and then I push literally the add button, plus add. Whatever I've got selected here will get added in. So if I want to add a program change, if I want to add a controller change, that's how you do it. Now I've made a list of what I want to change. The first thing I want it to do is right at the start of the song, I want GX-100 to realize it's supposed to be on patch 8-1. 8-1 in MIDI is channel 32. You don't want to put it in right at the start of the song though, because if you do that, it can get missed. Better to have it maybe on the start of bar 2. At the start of bar 2, I want to add a program change. Add that in there. I don't want this one, just delete that out. At the start of bar 2, I'm adding a program change. That's going to go on channel 1. That's all set up fine. I want to change the value of this one to number 32. Ignore all these instruments. They're just MIDI sounds, if you were. I want that to go on to 32. When we get to bar 21, this is when the first verse starts. Now, when we start to get to the start of that verse, I want to hit my rotary sound. Now, I'm going to use a control change to trigger that. So not changing my patch, just turning an effect on. I'm turning on the rotary effect. So when we get to bar 21, I now need to send not a program change, but a controller change. So there, controller change, I press plus to bring that in. And I'm going to send that number 1. Just leave that as number 1 for now. And I need to give that a value. There are 2 values you're going to be using. 127 for turning it on, and 0 for turning it off. Now I've given that 127 to turn that effect on. That effect should stay on until the end of bar 30. Sorry, till the start of bar 30. Now, at bar 30, I want that effect to get turned off. So I'm going to add another control change there. At the start of bar 30, on channel 1, turn controller number 1, send a value of 0. That means it's going to turn it off. If we go to bar 39, I want the same thing to happen again. So at the start of bar 39, I want the effect to kick in again. So another signal there. Oh, bar 40, that'll be fine for this one. Number value is going to be 127 to turn it on. And then I want that to come off on bar 48. So set that to 0 to turn it off. 127 on, 0 off. When we get to bar 49, this is when the guitar solo starts. Let me show you this in the track. We've got a more distorted sound there. So I'm moving away from my nice clean tone. I'm going onto a different patch altogether. So I can't just add an effect here. I want to change to a different patch. I'm going to use a program change to do that. So I'm going to go program change. This time I'm going to 8-2, and that is 33 in MIDI. I add a program change. This time go to 33. And then after 2 bars of that, I want to bring in my heavier guitar sound. Now I'm going to send a signal here at the start of bar 51. That can't be a program change, that needs to be a controller change, because I'm going to stay in patch 2, but I'm going to now tell it to bring on some effects, which we're going to do in the next part of our video. What I'm going to ask it to do is to send a control change here. I don't want it to send number 1 this time though. I want, because number 1, remember, turns on my turns on the rotary effect up here. I want this to change the effects in the solo channel, so I'm going to change this to number 3, and I need to turn that on. So 127. And then at the end of the song, I need to turn that off again so I don't get any nasty feedback. I'm going to set that here. I might want to ring out over the end, so we'll put that bar 63, sounds about right. Set a control change to turn those effects back off. So again, that's channel 3 I'm turning off. And 0 changes that to the off value. That is all of the MIDI data that we've got for changing patches. That is everything done. Now I'm going to show you how we set that up. It all happens in here. So I've pushed this button here, control expression, and that brings up these 4 menus here. Control function, assign settings, knob settings, and memory MIDI. Assign settings is the one that we want. Now, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 columns here. 1, 2, 3, 4 knobs underneath, which control those. This knob controls this column. This one does this one, the 3rd one, and the 4th one. Now we are controlling the overdrive on and off, the preamp solo switch on and off, and the delay on and off. But we could change those settings if we look in parameters. This one, by the way, confuses people. We use this one to change to different rows. On the delay, we can simply have it controlling on and off. But we could also use it to change the type of delay. We could use it to change the speed, any setting that the delay has. Fantastic tool. And the same goes for values we could change on the preamp. We're using it today to control the solo switch, but we could change the brightness, the sag, presence, middle, bass, anything you like. Let's stick it back on solo switch. We're just using that to turn it on and off. Now, we are currently using Control 1, that's this one here, to turn that on and off. But we sent MIDI data on Logic to tell it to change when we have Control Change 3. Control Change 3. Now, this is what we do to change this. We go on to the value we want to change. And instead of setting it to Control 1, we change the source to our control channels. Now you could turn right, here they are, you can go all the way up. We only want Control Change 3. So Control Change 3 turns the overdrive on or off. Now, it won't work if you do it on toggle, so you have to change it to moment. You have to change it to moment. Make sure you leave that on moment, otherwise it won't work. Same with this one, set that to CC3, set it to moment. And finally this one. That is everything that you need to do in order to change it so that now the source to turn the overdrive on is CC3. When it gets a value from CC3, it will do that. If you go to the next window, you can actually see that working. So the low number, when it gets a value of 0, it will be off, and when it gets a value of 127, it will be on. We already put those numbers in earlier. You remember 0 was off and 127 was on. And the last thing to do once you've done this, before you try and test it, is to push right to save your settings. And you need to do that over and over again, because when you test this with your MIDI and it takes you back into a different patch, those settings won't be saved. Ask me how I know that. Make sure you push right to save those settings. So we'll do that now. Right. Easy peasy.